Sippar was an ancient Near Eastern city on the east bank of the Euphrates River, located at the site of modern Tel Abu Habba in Iraq's Babel Governorate, some 60 kilometers north of Babylon and 30 kilometers southwest of Baghdad. The city's ancient name of Sippar could also refer to its sister city, Sippar Amnanim. A more specific designation for the city here referred to as Sippar was Sippar Yarurum. History. Despite the fact that thousands of cuneiform clay tablets have been recovered at the site, relatively little is known about the history of Sippar. As was often the case in Mesopotamia, it was part of a pair of cities, separated by a river. Sippar was on the east side of the Euphrates, while its sister city, Sippar Amnanim, was on the west. While pottery finds indicate that the site of Sippar was in use as early as the Uruk period, substantial occupation occurred only in the early dynastic period of the 3rd millennium BC, the Old Babylonian period of the 2nd millennium BC, and the Neo-Babylonian time of the 1st millennium BC. Lesser levels of use continued into the time of the Achaemenid, Seleucid and Parthian empires. Sippar was the cult site of the sun god and the home of his temple Ebabara. The code of Hammurabi Stela was probably erected at Sippar. Shamash was the god of justice, and he is depicted handing authority to the king in the image at the top of the stela. A closely related motif occurs on some cylinder seals of the Old Babylonian period. By the end of the 19th century BC, Sippar was producing some of the finest Old Babylonian cylinder seals. Sippar has been suggested as the location of the biblical Sepharvaim in the Old Testament, which alludes to the two parts of the city in its dual form. Rulers of Sippar in the Sumerian king list. A king of Sippar, Enmendu-Enna, is listed as one of the early pre-dynastic rulers of the region, but has not yet turned up in the epigraphic records. In his 29th year of reign, Sumu-Larel of Babylon reported building the city wall of Sippar. Some years later, Hammurabi of Babylon reported laying the foundations of the city wall of Sippar in his 23rd year and worked on the wall again in his 43rd year. His successor in Babylon, Samsu-Iluna, worked on Sippar's wall in his first year. The city walls, being typically made of mud bricks, required much attention. Records of Nebuchadnezzar II and Nabonidus record that they repaired the Shamash temple Ebabara. Classical speculation on Sippar's Esutheros, the Chaldean Noah in Sumerian mythology, is said by Berosus to have buried the records of the antediluvian world here, possibly because the name of Sippar was supposed to be connected with Sipru, a writing. And according to Abydonis, Nebuchadnezzar II excavated a great reservoir in the neighborhood. Pliny mentions a sect of Chaldeans called the Hipparni. It is often assumed that this name refers to Sippar, but this is not universally accepted. Archaeology. Tel Abu Habba, measuring over 1 square kilometer, was first excavated by Hormuz Rassam between 1880 and 1881 for the British Museum in a dig that lasted 18 months. Tens of thousands of tablets were recovered, including the tablet of Shamash in the Temple of Shamash, UTU. Most of the tablets were Neo-Babylonian. The temple had been mentioned as early as the 18th year of Samsu-Iluna of Babylon, who reported restoring Ebaba, the temple of Sesamus in Sippar, along with the city's ziggurat. The tablets, which ended up in the British Museum, are being studied to this day. As was often the case in the early days of archaeology, excavation records were not made, particularly find spots. This makes it difficult to tell which tablets came from Sippar Amnanim as opposed to Sippar. Other tablets from Sippar were bought on the open market during that time and ended up at places like the British Museum and the University of Pennsylvania. Since the site is relatively close to Baghdad, it was a popular target for illegal excavations. In 1894, Sippar was worked briefly by Jean-Vincent Scheil. The tablets recovered, mainly Old Babylonian, went to the Istanbul Museum. In modern times, the site was worked by a Belgian team from 1972 to 1973. Iraqi archaeologists from the College of Arts at the University of Baghdad, led by Walid al-Jadai with Farouk al-Rawi, have excavated at Tel Abu Habba from 1977 through the present in 24 seasons. After 2000, they were joined by the German Archaeological Institute. According to Professor Andrew Dorge, a cuneiform tablet containing a portion of the Epic of Gilgamesh probably came from Sippar.